Welcome guys, gals, and non-binary pals to this week's episode of Buffy Boys, your weekly review of Buffy the Vampire Slayer from a queer, literary and feminist perspective. My name is Joel, I'm one of your hosts, and with me as always is your other astute co-host.
Brian, hi.
Hi, how are you, Brian?
Yeah, fine.
We are both wearing matching sleeveless vests to this particular recording. Was
No,
that?
not. I'm not wearing that.
Yeah, yeah.
Don't lie.
I don't know if this is traditional podcast recording attire, but it is definitely becoming the standard, I think, for work from home. Would you agree, Brian?
Yeah, sure. Joe, when was the last time you wore jeans?
I must have worn jeans recently, even for a lark.
I don't think so.
There was a thing a couple of years ago, a thread going around about people who like to wear jeans to bed.
Oh, disgusting.
Apparently it gives them
Powers.
comfort. Not, but you say powers.
Yeah.
I think super.
Maybe, I don't know. That's the only reason I can think of wearing jeans to bed.
No, comfort, constraint, a sense of, you're putting on your sleep jeans.
It's kind of like how they, when they're trying to get cows to relax, they put them in machines that give them hugs.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Seems kind of cruel.
No, it's like it's physical pressure. It's like it's the same idea as the pressure blankets or the weight blankets.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
As you have obviously deduced, we are a podcast here to talk about Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And this week we are talking about Season 4, Episode 12.
A new man.
A New Man. I had it and then it went away.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so this was directed by Michael Gershman, who last directed Consequences, and written by Jane Espenson, who last wrote Doomed, which was the last episode. It was first aired on January 25th, 2000. And here is your Buffy Ann summary. Feeling neglected and patronized by Maggie Walsh, Giles goes for a drink with Ethan, who warns him of room 314 before changing him into a lumbering demon. Only Spike can understand him and demands payment for help. Buffy, thinking the demon has killed Giles, attacks him in Ethan's room, but recognizes him in time. Ethan is interned.
You know what I think that Joss Whedon is very incapable of doing?
No.
Naming a single character a person's name.
Ethan.
Ethan is a remarkably common name. You think, I'm just thinking like Maggie is unusual enough, but that kind of there are Maggies, but then like Cordelia, Willow, Xander, Rupert.
Makes Riley seem normal.
Yeah, Riley, Finn, 2 first names. So this episode is all about Buffy and the Initiative and their oncoming collision of different styles, and also Giles is a demon for a good portion of it.
Yeah, I do like the Giles demon stuff, I must say.
So before we get horns first into that particular conundrum, do we want to leap into our bronze banter topic for this week?
Yeah, sure.
We watched a horror film, surprisingly enough, called Ginger Snaps, which is probably not news to most people, as it came out
2000.
2000?
So 20 years ago.
Well, very contemporaneous with this then. But I think how we kind of came to it was we've kind of gotten to the point now we're at the last. We've run out of great horror films to watch. There are a limited amount of them. They're very specific, and there's a limited amount of great ones, and really a limited amount of watchably bad ones.
Yeah.
And we've, by this point, we've gone through a top 100, top 200. It's we have seen
and the bottom 100.
The vast majority of that, except for Ginger Snaps, which, for those of you who are unfamiliar, is a Canadian horror film about 2 sisters who are obsessed with death and photography and woolly jumpers and things like that, and
social outsiders,
Daria types.
No, Daria.
What people think Daria is about.
Yeah, but Daria is exemplified by being genuinely smarter than everyone around her.
Sure.
So
okay, well, what's the touch point for these particular sisters?
Claire from Six Feet Under.
Oh, a popular media character that everyone is familiar with.
Obsessed with death, photography, and likes to wear stupid clothes and have tantrums.
Sure. But into the mix comes some werewolves, or a werewolf, singular.
3 werewolves in the show altogether.
Well, one that instigates this, so one of the sisters gets infected, etc. And it was just incredibly unpredictable, and it was a lot of fun. Immediately within 10 minutes of it, I was like, of course, it's considered a cult classic. It's very quotable. It's incredibly bizarrely gory and just boggy horror disgusting at various points. It has a lot of interpolated sexual themes and imagery to it.
Explicitly has lots of association between werewolf status and menstruation, which is a new one to me. And it was actually just like one of the things we were talking about during it, which was really interesting, is that like it kind of feels like no one has really made a follow-up movie as a response to that. So it feels like it should have been a genre unto itself, but it kind of feels like its DNA gets like left in in that show, in that movie. You don't really see like the influence of that movie in any horror that came after it that I know of.
Yeah, so like I think we've got a reasonably broad and deep familiarity with horror, but what we mean by that is if you look at your Alien, if you look at your Nightmare on Elm Street, any of the real classics from the horror genre tend to have, if not imitators, a subgenre of horror that have developed from it. And we're like, yeah, this one kind of really got kind of strangled on the vine a little bit. And there's like quite a lot to mine there, and quite a lot that I felt was quite parallel or complementary to Buffy, in the sense like,
yeah, for sure,
written by a woman. It was very much focused. It was a very refreshingly kind of woman focused film, in the sense that it's all about these two sisters, their mother, but also the interplay of the werewolf curse transformation developing, menstruating, what's the word I'm looking for, puberty, high school hormones, and all of that, but in a way that wasn't trite. And yeah, just like really like disturbingly unpredictable.
Yeah, it was really good.
Literally, there's quite a bit of like, it opened with a dog getting quite violently killed.
Yeah, there's a bunch of dog like very visceral dog like gory killings. No, actually not the killings themselves, more so the aftermath of them, which is quite upsetting.
To be fair, something that we're often quite critical for obvious reasons of films for is, often they kill the pet in the horror film to escalate to the quote unquote kind of like
real problems.
Yeah. Exactly. I think the animal killings and all that were actually central to the plot and were treated relatively respectfully in comparison to like everything else.
Yeah, sure.
It wasn't like, oh, there was like a dog and whatever, and then something real happened. But yeah, like really unnerving, because you didn't know what was going to happen. What is going to spew out of where at what moment, and like the boggy horror cosmetics and creature work, which I'm a big fan of, probably exemplified, obviously I said before, with The Thing, but I think it's a perfect example of that. But it's like really present in it, and it's such a lost and underappreciated art.
Oh, totally. Yeah, and we were talking about it the other day about how we watched a movie a couple of months ago. I don't think we talked about it on the podcast. Maybe we did, but Possum, which was a really bizarre 2018 or 19, even 17 maybe, I'm not sure. A reasonably recent British horror movie about a guy who's like abuses a child, and this plot is like wafer thin, and the whole film like surrounds it's all based on the creature design and the puppetry, and there's no other real like draw to it, and it sells the whole movie on the basis of that, and it's terrifying because of it. I was fucking horrified.
Yeah, I really agree with you on that. I really think that's why horror is such a compelling genre, and why it can be adapted to so many subgenres like the high school horror and all that kind of stuff, because you just need one really strong concept for a horror film. A really strong concept, a central monster, will get you 70% of the way there. Good writing and compelling performances will get you the rest of the way. And obviously people can sometimes be very cheap on that, and it's like, oh well, we've just done the monster, we haven't really thought about making it scary. But I think Possum, which we watched, was kind of an example of that, where it was like unnerving at first, but it kind of didn't necessarily go anywhere.
Yeah, sure.
But I think something like Ginger Snaps really kind of like is very evocative in that way, because rom-coms as a genre have only existed for a certain amount of time. Your action films, your spy thrillers, you can usually trace these kind of stories back to some kind of relatively recent or semi-modern genesis. But the horror and the themes that are at the core of something like being afraid of a beast in the wood, being afraid of your body changing, the thin line between loving someone and kind of wanting to consume them in some way, and the violence that's involved there. That's very I can see you're grimacing at me right now. But like, this goes straight back to cave paintings. I think it's really, really rooted in what people are.
That's one of those things that people say at the beginning of like a critical analysis book about horror. That I'm always like, people have been telling fucking fantasy stories for millennia as well. Like, fear is the most primal emotion. It's like, no, fear is a primal emotion.
Yeah, but fantasy stories are a response to the powerlessness of fear.
Oh, sorry. Are they?
I think I'd be well suited to being a character in one of these horror films, and I would be the guy who...
You'd be well suited in the sense that you'd get like sacrificially killed quickly. So you'd be happy about it.
I would be the guy over a Zoom call who has maybe 6 minutes in the middle of the film where you find my number on some crank website or something, and I actually...
So you want to be Vincent D'Onofrio
in Sinister.
Sinister, yeah.
I will explain exactly what was going on and give you this context and do all the heavy lifting for the filmmakers of actually showing themes. I would just tell you what the themes are.
Actually, that's not fair, because Vincent D'Onofrio is actually quite a well-established and quite talented actor. So we probably shouldn't compare him to you.
And also I am here. And then there would be a moment where I'd be like, oh my god, I've realized that the killer is just recreating old Buffy episodes, and I take my glasses off and run to the door and someone would stake me.
Are you a vampire?
This is my transition.
Okay.
Humans can die from staking, as we've seen.
True.
But what can't die from being staked by a imitation silver letter opener is a Fjarl demon.
True that.
Which is obviously, as we all very clearly remember, is the conclusion of this episode of Buffy. So with that seamless transition, we are going to talk a bit about a new man. Which I really enjoyed.
Yeah, me too.
I enjoyed because it was very fun. I've always, as I said before, I love Giles, I love Ethan, I love that weird dynamic. It's such a rehash of a certain kind of like, clapped out old British warlock kind of thing, but
yeah.
I find it very compelling.
You know what I really found really annoying was I was on the Buffy Wikipedia page about this episode, and it doesn't mention in the Wikipedia page that this is the last appearance of Ethan Rayne, and I was like, oh, I should double check that. Maybe there's an episode in season 5 that he's in, and then I was like, Ethan will return in season 8, and I was like, ugh, fucking nerds being like, oh, he totally returns as a character. So like, why would we note that this is his last appearance? It's like, because the comics don't count because they're shit.
They are canonical. They're considered canonical.
You know what else is canonical?
What's that?
Like every Star Trek story of all time, they're all shit. Well, except for the thingamajig, the man who plays Captain Kirk. What's his name?
I'm not helping you with this. People are screaming at you right now down the episode.
William Shatner. William Shatner wrote some really, really bad Star Trek novels that don't count, right?
Yeah, so, well, I'm not going to take your bait too much, but Star Trek is quite good for the various parallel novel series it has. All are part of one continuous world and they play into each other, except for William Shatner's novels, because all of his novels just involve Captain Kirk coming back from the dead and saving the day. Captain Kirk, brain is big enough to like contain the planet that's going to explode, and he also revives his old lovers and gives Leonard McCoy's legs back. Like it's complete fan service.
Bizarre.
He also wrote a terrible series of original intellectual property sci-fi novels called Tech Wars, but it's TEK. It's like in the 80s. So we have basically very Jaws-centric episode, fair to say, I think. I think what we're doing here is we're giving a name and a face to the obvious issues that Jaws has in this new setting, where like he was such a linchpin narrative device in the first 3 seasons by being the only adult who was on their side for a large portion of time,
and being the font of information
for being the official representation of the Watchers Council. I was going to say guild there for a second, Watchers Council, and obviously being a teacher who could get them in and out of certain situations, and he just has none of that anymore. He by all accounts seems to just be a man of leisure who is independently financed, and
who fucking knows,
kind of has nothing to do with themselves. So I think this episode is really kind of about teasing that out. And I've read about this episode, and you may have something to say about this, but just that they kind of threw around a number of different premises. More than one premise for for how it might go to get this issue out. So it might involve, they suggested, for example, like Giles might be reverted to a younger age, and Ethan might as well. He might try to seduce people, and this whole thing of basically dealing directly with the idea of them having been past their prime, but rather they settle for this kind of, I suppose, more straightforward alienation kind of experience of him being this demon who can't relate or communicate to anyone.
Yeah, I mean, like, so, yeah, the primary metaphor, central metaphor of the episode is, of course, Giles turns into a demon. This is because he has, like, you know, metaphorically just so much anger being that he feels in this episode he can't express. He feels replaced because his daughter basically has gone off to college. She no longer needs him the same way. He's the last to learn about everything about her life. He doesn't find out. He finds out that Riley is both her boyfriend and one of the commandos after everyone in this episode, which is real harsh.
Like, it's egregious. I think that's really unfair.
And he kind of he has to face his own uselessness. So when he meets Maggie Walsh as well, being a huge linchpin there, because she is kind of she both is the equivalent that Buffy has like exchanged him for to a degree. She's a new font of information and a real influence on Buffy, but Maggie Walsh also like is stirring this herself. Like in the conversation between Maggie, Buffy, and Riley, Maggie is really just like a bit of a horrible person. She's like trying to she's trying to compete with Buffy to a degree, being like, oh, you just or you just point or push, you know, pointy sticks in people, and that's how you do it, and we do it with a leading world-class technology, and we're brilliant, and you're shit. And
fuck you, 19-year-old girl.
Exactly. And like, yeah, and then she like one of the things that Mark Field said about the episode is that she like engages in like a cock measuring contest with Buffy, but it like sacrifices Riley to do it for her. And like he fails miserably because he kind of says that he's killed 17 hostiles,
subterrestrials.
And Buffy has to say like, I have no idea how many I've killed, because Buffy would have no interest in counting how many like vampires or anything she's killed, because it's not sport or fun for her, or a like, you know. So Maggie Walsh has come to really disrupt the ecosystem within the Buffyverse here, and and with all that, Giles is feeling a lot of rage, inability to communicate, and a past his primeness that gets expressed by him turning into a literal demon. Yeah,
I think that it's an interesting, I think fairly rarely used throughout the season, dynamic between Giles and Maggie Walsh. But I think this actual circumstance of it, of him going to her lecturer's office being like, have you seen this 19-year-old who I know because I was her librarian in school? Like, I think Maggie is like ridiculously adversarial, but I don't disagree with her being like, sorry, who are you? Why are you? He walks into the office and starts looking at her degrees and trinkets like he's about to threaten her. It has that vibe to it. But and then we have this whole thing of him being at Buffy's birthday party, which for once doesn't devolve into her being tortured or abused or thrown through a window or anything like that.
Has happened at one point.
And Riley asks Giles if he's retired, and basically treating him like an OAP, bringing him cake and calling him sir.
It's so dark. Yeah, it's not great. One thing that the episode is doing is that it's building on the kind of the central premise of this season, which is the Scooby Gang trying to find their own feet and being scattered and being like a splintered group. So there's a real lack of communication throughout the season, for sure, as highlighted in Hush. In this episode, very specifically, you see that kind of, we've given Giles his POV episode. He very much is expressing his loneliness and his disillusion, his being disillusioned with what's going on. And this is the kind of laying the basis in which we will be able to build back up that connection at the end of the season, which is a nice little, like, you know, threading the plot of the season into throughout the beginning.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it does a good job as well of kind of re-establishing the significance of the Slayer, because I think when you start off with a really pure premise so that she is the Vampire Slayer and there is a vampire threatening her and there is a Vampire King, in season 1 that's kind of very clear through line, and I think it can get kind of lost in the sauce a bit when you have all these various apocalypses and demons and all that kind of stuff. But through juxtaposing her with, which ironically is a word I don't use very often on this very literarily wanky podcast, but in juxtaposition between the Slayer and the Initiative, it gives her a lot of credibility back that maybe has been, I think, diluted.
Yeah.
You know, she clearly not only is more capable individually, and in many ways also psychologically more on the right wavelength for what she's doing, but she has experience and actual expertise that they just don't, despite all their various gadgets.
Yeah, due to their inability to really see the demonic happenings for what they are, as being chaotic, not in keeping with what's going on here. So obviously, Ethan Rayne and Giles have this really good conversation in the bar where they're getting drunk together. That's fascinating. So Ethan is talking to Giles about how there's something in that all the demons are afraid of at the moment because everything's being thrown out of balance. And he says, it's throwing the world out of balance is the actual quote. I'm not sure why I didn't just whatever. And then he says, like, you know, it's worse than chaos. It's unstructured, basically. And that is, of course, Adam in 314, who is going to be coming soon, both to kill his creator in Maggie Walsh, and then on to terrorize the town. And he's against what is intended in Buffy's, like, you know, balance that she's introduced to the universe. Like, Adam represents a deeply man-made problem of trying to control a thing. I mean, like, we're going to talk lots of Frankenstein references when we get to Adam, but what Buffy exists to do is to maintain order and to be fair, and what Adam represents is the entire opposite. It's folly and
monopoly and hegemony of, you know, forcing. Yeah, it's some very clear metaphors of forcing together completely disparate cultures.
Yeah, and it's like applying science to something that's not scientific. Which we've talked about before, but hugely in this episode you get that sense of that kind of conflict between science and magic. When, like, you have, even, oh god, the fucking part that annoyed me most about this episode.
Okay.
I realised this episode, sorry, so that's badly phrased, but there was a part in this episode that it really troubled me. Actually, no, there are two parts. One was the part where Ethan Rayne has a line where he's like, religious intolerance, sad that, look at the Irish troubles.
Yeah, we had to replay that to be like, excuse me?
What the fuck? I mean, who was sitting, Jane Espenson was apparently sitting around, or someone in the writer's room, saying, Ethan Rayne, he's from England, let's give him a line about, like, you know, Northern Irish troubles. That's appropriate for some fucking reason. Bizarre.
There was a tendency, I think, around this period where people were trying to legitimize people from certain backgrounds by just casually referencing the troubles.
Yes.
Whereas, like, now you might have difficulty getting an English person to, like, know the context.
I was talking to someone who I work with recently, a couple of months ago, and I was talking to him about he's English, he's from England, so that's the context here. And we were talking about, I can't remember how we got onto it, but he was talking about the English history curriculum and about how you had to specifically study history to even, like, you know, in, say, A-levels. A-levels is the hard one, right?
Yeah.
In A-levels, you had to choose specific, like, not modules, but like areas of interest to hear anything about Ireland at any point. Like, there was certainly nothing about the Troubles. There's nothing about, you know, the famine, certainly. There's nothing about, like, you know, conquering a country for your own fucking monetary gain. And there's nothing about colonization in English history. It's just like, oh, War of the Roses, what happened there? Lol. And it's like, fucking idiots. Like, I don't know.
But Ethan Rayne is on the pulse. He remembers.
True. Anyway, but the other thing that really annoyed me was when Riley basically tells Buffy that she's not, like, come with him to go get the demon. And he says, it's not really your call. This is a military operation now. Yeah. And she's just like, piss off.
Yeah. So it's like a slightly dark conclusion, because there's an aspect of, through Riley, him being the sympathetic soldier, and obviously, like, I don't think that, you know, US military operations weren't exactly completely without criticism at the time. But I think now, the idea, like even for something like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, like it's difficult to have. It's a very difficult balance to have sympathetic either military or police forces in a US kind of televisual context. But at the end, they basically black bag Ethan Rayne, and he says you've been detained at the pleasure of the United States military, and he presumably disappears to like Guantanamo Bay or something forever. Yeah, and we're like, yeah, get him. And Giles is like, I'm gonna follow him outside. I can see the manhandle him. So like,
bizarre,
little squiffy on that.
The kind of like negativity towards the U.S. forces, I think, it mainly came around with the Iraq and Afghanistan war in the mid 2020 noughties. That's what I was going to say. So around this point, it was just like, I don't think people were really paying attention to the U.S. armed forces,
Probably not in the same scrutiny. But let's stick to talking areas, more familiar areas, which we don't know what we're talking about.
Sure.
In that particular regard. But what I like about, in terms of this episode, in terms of reintroducing Ethan, is that it really does allow Giles to show a side of himself that he just doesn't have opportunity to do, and whatever it is about the way Giles' character is constructed, he can only demonstrate personality when he's in opposition to something or when it's triggered by something. He's a very inert, and I don't mean that negatively, but he's very like a solid and stable character otherwise, so he needs to be knocked off balance
to show genuine personality.
And I think it's a very good use as well in this episode of Spike, in terms of like literally acting out in full the role of the truth teller, because he's the only person who can understand the truth of what's happening by linguistic definition, because he speaks the demon language. So I think that's quite interesting as well.
It was well done. The scene where Giles is like waking up Xander, being like, Xander, please wake up and be gentle, I love you, stuff like this, and Xander just screams in his face. I found that quite funny. I liked it. There's
a lot of physical comedy with Giles trying to put on a shirt or use a phone or open a door
or go downstairs.
A completely indefensible moment as well, where he's trying to defend himself morally to Spike, and then sees Maggie Walsh on the street and just jumps out, to chase her and scream at her and scare her. Horrible. Like you can't defend that at all.
You can't, but I'm very happy you did it. I hate Maggie Walsh.
She's yet to say a smart thing. Like, she is portrayed as this hard-ass brilliant psychology professor, and I know that it's obviously being translated through the filter of having super ego. But her genius idea right now is that in the same breath where she's saying, I don't teach introductory psych from the textbook, and surely the next thing she says should be some really pithy and complex theory, and she's like, I think Buffy has an absent father figure.
It was pretty funny. I mean, like, imagine being your, like, what you brag about is like, I don't teach 19-year-olds the basics. It's psychology. It's like,
I don't
psychology
properly equip people.
It's just like, I toss a bunch of 19-year-olds into the deep end in their introductory psychology course, because fuck it, why not? I'm actually too cool for that shit. It's like, you're probably just a bad teacher then.
Well, I think it's interesting in terms of how they structure these kind of episodes in the middle of the season as well, is in terms of who's absent, because Joy's gone in this season so far. Riley's two compatriots, Forrest and the other one whose name I cannot retain.
It's great.
Graham. Forrest and Graham should be in this episode, I think, in many ways, because it's so initiative focused, but they're not. I think it's kind of they've expanded their cast to the extent where they really need to they can't even afford reasons why they're not there anymore. They kind of just need to focus in.
All right, Joel, a couple of questions for you. What does the title refer to?
The title refers to a couple of things.
Okay.
It refers it refers to Giles being transformed into a demon, being a new man. To him having to find a new role in life.
Sure.
To perhaps a hint of Adam there as well.
Okay.
In terms of they're making a new man.
Sure.
Man 2.0.
Okay.
I'm getting close to what is... I'm sure you have the objective correct answer written down there. Do you want to share with me?
No, I was just thinking. Also there you have Buffy has a new man in her life,
She does.
Riley, and that's what sets everything off balance for Giles. She doesn't have time or space to be thinking about Giles because she has a new beau who she's obsessed with. Additionally, I would kind of conject, is that a word?
Yeah, it is now.
Okay. That part of that is the kind of traditional patriarchal structures that we're inspecting this episode. So as opposed to the, very patriarchal, very male scientific approach that we see in this episode, you get a much more holistic and well-balanced approach to the problem and problem solving in Buffy's more and I'm talking essentialism in terms of gender theory, as opposed to, I don't think this is the actual behavior of humans, but in terms of a more feminine approach to problem solving and to solutions, which, a new man, is that kind of being put into question there? Like, what is masculinity and manliness in this situation, especially when you have Riley specifically having his masculinity questioned in this episode, because he and Buffy spar at one point.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, don't hold back, I can take it. And of course he can't take it. She's a Slayer, but he can't really understand how a small woman could physically
boot him across the room.
Exactly. Yeah. He, in fairness, does take it pretty well. He's like, oh, wow, that's not what I was expecting, but well done. I'm glad you didn't hold back or whatever. And then you also, of course, have Giles' masculinity in question as well, which is funny because he's actually someone who has had a very well-established and a very secure masculinity in his characterization throughout the show. But I think so I think there's questions there about gender balance and gender expression, not gender expression, I suppose.
Performance of gender.
Yeah, gender performativity in the title there as well, which I think is pretty cool. Yeah,
because it's very much Giles' masculinity, not in terms of his inherent or his personal masculinity, but again how it's performed in relation to Buffy, because he ties quite a lot. He's her watcher, and she is the Slayer. A significant part of his identity is tied to her. So it's another reason why I think the fact that she just didn't tell him about the plot of the season basically is wicked harsh.
It's not cool, Buffy.
I always thought it was funny how I think this is probably one of my first memories in a TV show of specifically an arc word or
bad wolf or
bad wolf, and MacGuffin of walks in room 314. So it's one of the shortest ones in history. I think literally in the next episode, they're like, this is what's in room 314.
Yeah. Is the next episode that Maggie Walsh gets killed?
I potentially. So it is actually next episode that Maggie Walsh dies.
Fuck.
So I think that's probably part of how they're interplaying as well with, as we said, the Adam and the man-made issue is disrupting the natural balance, and even that natural chaos system, in the sense that, even by Buffy's standards, by the television show standards, Maggie doesn't get the development you would expect, but not because she's underwritten. It's just, it is very violently and specifically interrupted and collided with by this other storyline.
That's not untrue, though. I think there's probably something to be argued there about, because if you think about the end, the last couple of episodes of the season before they actually do manage to take on Adam, there's a bunch of just time where they're just like, he's out there, we should really do something about it, but we can't figure out what it is. And that kind of time could have been eaten. I think what happened here was maybe conflict of schedule for some of these actors, and conflict of writing and interjected stuff by the studio and stuff. Because it really, really, for me, coming off seasons 2 and 3 of Buffy, it feels so understructured as a season.
It's a looser season, absolutely, with no question. Even with the fact that Adam is by far the big bag has introduced the latest season of Buffy.
Yeah, true. Okay, come here. What did you think of the scene with Willow and Tara?
Yeah, I thought it was very very, very evocative and very effective in terms.
It was so sweet.
It was very sweet. So basically, they're trying to do a witchy spell,
but they're like, oh, we'll just we're practicing together and we'll see how in sync we are, and it was very sweet.
Yeah, they interlock fingers and minds and lift a rose and delicately peel off the petals to show.
Come on.
Yeah.
Come on.
While some light Ren Fair music plays in the background.
And of course, you're not actually allowed to own a living space as a queer person without putting fairy lights up unnecessarily somewhere. and that's what she does.
We say as we're sitting underneath ours.
Yep, that's it's a self read.
Yeah, but yeah, it's a very delicately developed storyline at this point. But I don't think, even looking back and even with the current standards and our foreknowledge, I don't think it's overly subtle in a good way. I think it is what is happening.
Agreed.
Definitely as much as any romance or relationship in this show. A couple of episodes in, this is what they tend to be like.
Agreed. Okay, do you want to move into the dusting?
Absolutely.
Great. I'll have to hit you up with some Buffy bits, okay? Mm-hmm. So, the crypt that Giles and Ethan are in when they're arguing, the one where they go to find the demon prince, that's actually the crypt which becomes Spike's future home.
Mm. Yeah. He's on the hunt for it this week.
Mm-hmm. This is the last appearances of Giles' Citron, which is sad.
His mad old car.
Yep. So Tara is going to be in every episode of season 4 after this point, which is fun. I do like Tara, even though I find her portrayal sometimes a bit inconsistent. Oh yeah, and building on what you said earlier, the Doug Petrie quote about how they were trying to develop, they approached this metaphor in this episode through different modes. They were thinking about doing portals for Giles, or making him and Ethan young. Mm-hmm. Apparently the writing staff had a lot of fun in this episode because they specifically got to explore an adult metaphor, or a metaphor applicable to adults rather than they've been consistently dealing with teenage issues up to this point, which is fun.
As this is the last appearance of Ethan, I'm not sure if we mentioned this previously, but that Ethan's actor died in 2013. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's in a couple of other genre properties which I enjoyed him in, and he also was in a pretty good Buffy game as well.
Oh yeah, the one that we have on Xbox?
Yes.
Oh cool. Yeah. I think that is the good Buffy game, right? Mm-hmm. Fun. Okay, do you have any Buffy bits there, or is that all you have? Is that everything, Joel?
The relatedly also about the death count for this episode. Mm-hmm. They mention in the death count on the Buffy Wikipedia page Riley's 11 vampires and 6 demons which he has killed at some point in his life, which I did not count.
No,
towards
there are no deaths in the episode.
I like that in this episode Giles acknowledges that he's just a middle-aged librarian with a penchant for getting knocked on the head.
Yeah. Okay, well, should we look at some fashion then?
Please do.
Okay, so obviously I think the most important fashion point of the episode is Giles wearing Ethan's absolutely disgusting silk shirt at the very end of the episode because he has nothing else to wear because he's just been demonized.
Yeah, the textures or something else.
Oh, gross.
Looks like Noel Edmonds.
Huh?
Looks a bit like Noel Edmonds.
Yeah, a little bit. Giles, when not doing at the end of the episode, he looks quite good. He's wearing like a nice, loose baggy, granddad shirt, jumper. But at the beginning of the episode, he's wearing mom jeans, and he looks like he's, I'm not sure what's going on there. He's very unusual.
He looks like a middle-aged man going to a 19-year-old's birthday party.
Yeah, he really does. At one point, Willow is wearing a jumper with a rainbow on it and 2 stars placed just slightly off center. Yeah, it's just weird. I'm not sure what's going on there. And otherwise, actually, I found the fashion really boring in this episode. There was nothing crazy, and I think Buffy just wears black.
Yeah, Maggie Walsh consistently, while she's alive, just wears a jumper tied around her neck, like she's about to, divorce her husband on the tennis court. Exactly. Yeah. I think it's all the fashion, and obviously, Giles is very fashion forward. What's the word I'm looking for? High fashion haute couture. Blanket that he wears as a feral demon.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, Joel, what's your rating?
What's my rating for this episode? I'll go traditional with this. I'll give this episode probably a 8.3 slices of birthday cake.
Oh, okay, great. I also had 8.3, so I'm going to go for 8.3 Irish Troubles out of 10.
It's a good episode. It's funny.
It's a lot of fun.
There's
anything that focuses on Giles is going to be good. Usually,
a few bad Giles episodes. I think it uses the format very well to explore a theme in a way that kind of sneaks into your brain. Sometimes you watch this stuff, you're not, when you don't have the keen critical eye that we do, but you kind of look at it and you think, oh, I'm just watching a funny adventure. It's like, oh no, I'm clearly watching a man have a midlife crisis. So I do like being tricked into watching things sometimes.
Yeah, me too. Okay, shall we move on to the Cordelia chase?
Yeah, absolutely. So this week on the Cordelia chase over on Angel, the series, we have the episode Expecting, which is interesting.
It was not a bad episode in and of itself.
It's not in itself. I think
it was a bit of fun.
It's a bit of fun. It's very B movie, very cheesy. Basic premise is that Cordelia is trying to get up and coming in the fashion / film / TV world, and she goes on a date with her pack of cool LA girls. And dates.
Never to be seen again, I presume.
No, I don't believe so. Perhaps understandably, given the events of this episode. But she dates a well-known photographer who is played by his name escapes me, but he's
he's in Veronica Mars and he's in Party Down.
Yeah, I'll actually find his name because I think that's
relevant.
Yeah. And yeah, so a photographer who played by Ken Marino, who has been in things like Party Down and like Veronica Mars, and he has his own thing, Burning Love. You've probably seen ads for.
I never have.
I think you recognise if I showed it to you. But anyway, she gets impregnated by a demon. He's a demon vessel, the Sieg thrower. And so she goes to sleep after this party. She wakes up the next day. She's 8.5 months pregnant. And there's a lot of stuff of her going to doctor's offices, and they give her a scan, and they get sick, and the demon baby's blood burns the floor, and she's facilitating between being freaked out, but then kind of coming under a spell and be like, I need to protect my demon spawn.
Yeah.
There's some quite nice work in it, insofar as it really shows Wesley kind of developing outside of maybe the stuffy character he had on Buffy, and being able to do things like, at the end, Angel throws some liquid nitrogen at the demon, and Wesley shoots it, and is effective in that way. He's genuinely caring and helpful towards Cordelia, and they're developing the sense that the three of them are a unit, and as Angel says at one point, a family. At
the end of the episode, Cordelia is like, I'm so lucky I have the two of you in my life. You're the two people I trust the most in the world. And it's like, well, fuck you, Wesley. Doyle.
Yeah.
And also all of the Scooby Gang, which is fair. I don't think she got on very well with any of them.
So yeah, I think that dynamic is really nice, and I think Dave Boreanaz and Alexis Denisoff are very funny together, and they actually do genuinely have a great chemistry.
I think the three of them, like as a unit, are like a really
very
good thing
effective.
going on.
The negatives of the episode, which are fewer compared to some of the episodes we've seen in Angel so far, are that it's very, very broad as a plot. It's very like the demon itself when it comes out. If you remember that the Gaknar demon, who was the punchline at the end of the Halloween episode in Buffy recently, so he's actually really tiny.
Oh yeah.
And comically tiny. This guy was comically large, but it wasn't meant to be funny. But it was a guy in a suit juxtaposed against all these pregnant women in a bath. So it was a bit strange, and also, perhaps when we're rating this out of failed feminist gestures, this is one of 3 distinct episodes and events in Angel where Cordelia is impregnated by a demon against her will.
Yeah.
So
it's hard not to feel like that's punishment. Do you see that thing recently where Charisma Carpenter said that apparently she was never consulted in terms of her moving to Angel? She was just, she basically turned up after this, for shooting, and they were like, oh, and you're actually going to be an Angel now.
Oh, right, yeah. No, I didn't know anything about that.
Yeah. I don't know. There's just everything about how Cordelia's character turned out and on Angel, and how Charisma Carpenter was treated is just scummy.
I feel slightly under-equipped and underqualified to unpack any of the specific production drama around this kind of stuff and the various movements of things that happened 20 years ago. All we can say for certain is that it doesn't seem like it was handled very well, and that what has gone on to be the lasting effect of it is that people like Sarah Michelle Gellar, people like Charisma Carpenter are beloved, appreciated, and have continued to have positive effects on people because of their work on these shows, which I think is kind of all we can really take forward from it. But yeah, when you have such a powerful character as Cordelia, there's some very interesting, very tasteful, appropriate feminist things you can do around this kind of impregnation fear and the body horror of it and the power dynamic, but just maybe not so early and maybe not so played for laughs to a certain degree. Not so often, yeah. But by and large, a fun episode.
Sure.
Moves along at a clippy pace, and I would probably give it, I'm going to say, 7 failed feminist gestures.
Yeah, I'm gonna go for 6 feminist gestures.
No, I'm happy with 7. I think.
I think I would have given the 7 and knocked it down a point for the awful pregnancy shit.
That's fair.
Yeah.
So that's us for this week, I think.
What is next week on Angel? Actually, I know for next week on Buffy is going to be the Iron Team.
Next week on the Cordelia Chase is the episode She, which is very bad, and it's all about like sexy lady demons who, if they get too hot, they're gonna die, so they have to have sex. I think I'm poorly remembering it, but like that
sounds like a bad Star Trek episode.
It is like a bad Star Trek episode, or a very good episode of Sliders. So we're gonna leave you there for this week. My voice is by degrees disappearing as I proceed through this.
We're gonna have a nice silent evening there for the rest of the night.
Yeah,
can't wait.
Do you know what I think about sometimes I get to this part of the podcast is
running away?
Once or twice recently when I've been on a work call, because we all work remotely now.
Yeah.
And I've started talking and I'm using my hands and I'm talking about, well, what we need to do is this. And as you know, we said we were going to do that and so on. I got to the end of it once or twice recently and the other people on the call were like, sorry, who were you talking to? Because I've just kind of like wandered into a paragraph and kind of expounding on it. And kind of done that thing you do a podcast where you work from one point to the other. But then they've been like, sorry, what? I'd be like, can you email me that thing, please? That might just be what I was trying to say.
Wow.
So it's infecting. It's fully infecting every corner and facet of my life. But that's it from us. That's it from us.
Great,
blah, 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 blah.
Okay.
That is it from us here at Buffy Boys HQ. Thank you very much for listening. We appreciate your patronage.
That stands for homo queers. That stands for homo queers.
Homo queers.
Yeah.
We would appreciate that if you enjoy our podcast, please tell your friends, tell your soon to be deceased psychology professors. Got a little dark there. And keep safe, wash your hands, and we will see you next time on Buffy Boys. Buffy Boys. See ya.
See you.